Welcome and thank you for taking your Saturday morning with us to share your experiences and insights. How have you been? Actually, we have recorded this since about a month ago.
Yeah, I think it's been very interesting, right? The period of adjustment, that's what I call it. And I really see it in three different dimensions, right? One is from the family perspective. Two is really internal business, our teams and whatnot. And three is really looking at it from the external business, how our customers coping and whatnot, right? And the first element of it has been quite interesting, right? The first element is really about the families getting closer together. I think if you've seen Facebook, you see fantastic new culinary skills coming out from everywhere. People are baking and cooking together. I think family time, right? The most precious time, I would always say, is fantastic now. People are really spending a lot of time together and adjusting, right? I think a lot of families are adjusting the fact that they've got the children at home, they're doing home-based learning, they are adjusting to how do we manage that and work at the same time. That's a period of adjustment, like I mentioned earlier. And funny enough, sometimes too good a thing is also not great, right? I always say it's saccharine sweet. Saccharine sweet is not fantastic. Sweet is okay, right? And my daughter said this, and my children actually, they said this. They're quite glad to go back to school. They just started, right? 2 weeks now, because they've spent enough time with me for the rest of the year, right? So because I travel a lot, so they don't see me that much. So now they're like, "Wow, man, you're here all the time," right? So I'm coping with that. It's just so interesting, right? To see that. So I think a family adjustment, right? Jokes aside, in many different ways, many different. Things are so different at home, and people are just trying to adjust. I think that I see a lot of that happening internally within the teams, right? Everything is a conference call, right? I think last week, one of your speakers, right, he mentioned this Zoom fatigue, right?
Yes.
And I think people go through that because there's no such thing as having this corridor chat or, hey, let's go down for a coffee, and those sort of things which breaks the monotony. It doesn't happen, right? And also working in at home all the time. When do you break? When do you pause? When do you say, hey, that's it, this is the end of the day for me? Those sort of things are people are beginning to figure out, hey, it's a bit tough. I mentioned this to you earlier as well, that my friends used to tell me, hey, you're so lucky, you've got flexibility of time, right? And you can work from home sometimes. And I always used to tell them, yeah, but working from home, sometimes you end up working longer hours because you don't know where the demarcation is, right? And they always used to think I was joking. And I had so many calls after this, like, the last few months, and people say, how do you adjust? It's just so hard, so difficult to know when to stop, right? And when to start, and when do you take your breaks? And I think figuring out the balance is extremely important. One of the great things that Red Hat has done is yesterday, all 14,000 associates had a day off. We call it the recharge day. The company did realize from the start, right? Having this, everybody staying at home and having the families at home, plus the pressures of making sure that children do the work at home, and also the other pressures, right? Of wearing a mask, going out, everything else, right? Everything adds a little bit of stress because it's abnormal, so to speak. Just to stop everything and just take a day off, and like the word implied, recharge, right? Recharge. So and that's important. Rest is so important, and then you can come back and do things even better, right? So we took a stand as a company to do that. I know that other companies are doing that in our industry as well, and I highly encourage people to do that, because it really gives all the employees a time to just break away from the monotony. Right? That's from the, I would say, from the internal business perspective. Externally, and this is interesting because we are in Asia. There are some cultures within Asia where meeting face to face is the norm. They don't do conference calls, right? And they had to adjust as well to having calls. In the first few months, we had a lot of customers saying, hey, wait till this passes. I think it'll be another couple of months, then we'll catch up. They realized very soon, I mean, we've been working from home for nearly 5 months now, that's not going to come very soon, right? So they have to adjust, and they have to start realizing, hey, we need to use technology, we need to do workshops online, we need to close deals online. We need to do our meetings online, and them with their business partners, other business partners, right? The B2B relationships that they have as well, try to, and the B2C relationships, to try and make sure that they go online as quickly as possible, right? Many businesses have folded, which is really, really sad. Some of the restaurants that I've been going to since I was 17, 18, those restaurants are closing down for good, and this is a very bad, very sad reality of what's happening out there. And I'm hoping that this will ease off as quickly as possible, so people can go back to work, and of course, go back to the norm that we are all used to.
That's true. Yeah. So thank you, Viju, for your insights as to what has been happening. So for those who have just joined us, we have Mr. Viju Chakarapany with us today. And the episode premiere is actually on focus and know your customers to thrive in the future. So right now we're just having a chit-chat session before we actually have the episode premiere at 11 a.m. And Viju, we have someone who wants to say hello to you. His name is Steve. Okay, so good to hear your voice, he says.
So glad that Steve's on. Steve's actually dialing in from Canada, right?
Wow.
He used to be in my team. So thanks, Steve, for joining the call. Really appreciate it. It's great to, even though I can't talk to him directly, it's great to see, people online, watching this.
Yes. So that's the aim of this particular episode, actually, to basically have different business leaders from different industries and sectors actually share their insights, their experiences, so that we can all learn together and basically ride through this crisis. Like you said earlier on, I think the end is not in sight so soon. It will probably be another 1 to 2 years. And even if we do go back to office, there's so much that we have to observe in terms of social distancing and all those. Therefore, as social animals, like you said, it's tough. How do you say hello? How do you say express actually the closeness itself? So I'm not going to really go into how you actually work with your customers, because I think that's what you shared within the episode premiere itself. But I would just like to ask, like, for instance, you mentioned that Red Hat actually had a recharge day, and that people basically felt that you had the luxury of working from home previously. So what were your advice actually to people who actually called in to say that they found it difficult?
I think, I said this to my team a few weeks ago. In fact, when I was having my one-on-one conversation to them, burnout is a binary game, right? There is no such thing as I feel like I'm going to burn out soon, right? Once you're either not in it or you're in it. It's like falling off a cliff, right? And once you fall off the cliff, that's it, right? It's very difficult to stop that fall from happening. So being very, very disciplined on demarcation of time is important. That means when you start work, when you end work, and when you end, you really end. Taking your breaks, for example, is very easy, right? For the lunchtime to be taken up by another conference call, even when you're in the office, that happens, right? But take the time off and make sure that you have, enough time for you to recharge, so to speak. Something like what we did for a whole day yesterday, right? And realizing when it's too much. And also because we are a multinational company and we work long hours, because we have got conference calls at night as well, right? And I did tell one of my colleagues, someone in my team, hey, this whole week you're having conference calls, right? All night. Why did you just take the morning off, right? And take it easy and recharge and rest, because if not, you'll be coming back to work, be it online, right? It may be, but you will still be spending a lot of time. You will not be spending a lot of time sleeping, right? You are not getting your rest. You had 2 hours or something. So I think it's about discipline, about adjusting, about ensuring that you get the rest. It's about making sure that when you're on, you're 100% on, so you can get your job done quickly and efficiently, right? I think those sort of things are extremely important. It's easier said than done, right? Even for me, I have to really pry myself out sometimes, and I think that's important, especially for the longevity, right? Especially because this is not going to end soon, right? Like what you mentioned.
Yeah.
And we need to make sure that we last as long as possible. So take the time off. I mean, even taking leave. Somebody asked me the other day, I'm taking Monday off. And they're like, you're taking leave to go where? Right? I say, I'm just taking time off to just get away from it all, right? And do the things I want to do, right? And read a book and whatnot. And also doing some things with the family, like my mom, I'm trying to help her with some stuff, doing that. I think it's still important to take that break.
Yeah, thanks, Viju. So we are at 11 right now, so I'll hide you for a little while and we'll play the episode premiere. We'll come back to the Q&A later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, welcome to the Leadership During Crisis Online Summit series. Thank you for taking your time to watch these episodes. Please remember to subscribe at our YouTube channel, follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook under Leadership During Crisis. How has COVID-19 crisis impacted your organization?
I think for even answering that question, right, we really need to look at life and business, right? Crises, predictably unpredictable. Some are major, some are minor. You have some which can quickly be resolved, and some like COVID-19, right? We are just waiting for the light at the end of the tunnel and still trying to figure out, okay, what do we do? How do we balance this? In my career, I think I've experienced quite a lot of these major upsets and crises, right? When I first started working, I had the Asian financial crisis in 1997. That's the year that I graduated. Then I had the dot-com bust and all the recessions that came on after that. Then after that, I had to witness SARS outbreak in 2002, the global financial crisis in 2008. My point is, this happens, right? This sort of crisis happens all the time. It's ups, it's downs. It's really about what matters, right? What really matters is not the size or type of the crisis. It's really how we react, and more importantly, how we prepare for it. In my organization, in Red Hat, we have done quite a lot of things to ensure that we manage this well. And your question is really on the impact side of things. I mean, think about it. The whole country has come to a standstill. Quite a number of countries are on lockdown. Companies have shut. Airline business is non-existent, right? And we've got lots of customers in all these key areas of business. And everybody is trying to grapple with what's happening at this moment in time, right? And usually when these things happen, and we saw this during SARS as well, is everything stops. Everybody comes to a standstill because they really want to evaluate what is going on, right? Even though we have done a lot of preparations for the unexpected leadership exits, departures, testing business resilience through BCP and everything else that we can do, these things still have an impact on how we do business, right? The normal reaction is to stop and just look around and try and see what is going on, right? And see how can we approach this. Our approach has been fairly simple, right? I would say simple in the sense that because there are important things that we really, really need to focus on. And I say this to my team all the time. This is extremely important for us to understand that you focus on your customers first. Right? That is number one. And that's very critical for us to think about all the time. Right? We need to weather this storm together. Listening to them, staying in touch, understanding what they are going through is extremely important at this stage, right? Because we have to come back and represent their challenges and request to the decision makers internally. So collectively, we can come up with a mutually beneficial solution. An example could be longer payment terms. Maybe we can afford to give maybe another 30 days or another 60 days for the customer so that they can manage the cash flow. Okay, fine, let's try and do this together so that I help you and you help me. And that's an example of how we are trying to listen to the customers and see where exactly they need the immediate help. Most importantly is, of course, be honest and be really, really open. In Red Hat, we have this open culture, and for us that comes naturally. When we go out there and we are really open with the customers, we get very good, interesting reaction. They're very pleased with the way we have come out openly and talked to them about what our challenges are and listening to their challenges. and they react in a way where we can truly build trust and ensure that whatever approach that we take helps us to build a long-term relationship. Right? So I think that's extremely important.
Earlier on, you did mention about this approach, but also during our discussion a little earlier, you mentioned that Red Hat has prepared quite a lot, not only from the customer's perspective, but also from the employee's perspective. Could you elaborate a little bit more?
So that's a very good point brought up. And usually we only talk about the customers. And I think Red Hat is an organization who puts both on the same pedestal. The customers and the associates are as important. Right? And for us, we cannot survive without either of them. Right? We need to focus on that. Our people are extremely, extremely important for us. We look after our people and who are going through this crisis. And I give you a classic example. We started working from home 9 weeks ago. When we first started, most companies were not even thinking about working from home yet. Let's focus and make sure that they are safe, that their families are safe. Let's not take any unnecessary risks. Even from a financial perspective, Red Hat has done quite a lot to ensure that we do the right things by providing for the ones who are most vulnerable within our organization, to ensure that they don't get left behind at the end of the day, or they don't get that badly affected. Right? And as a community, and this is so important to us because in Red Hat community is so important to us, we have ensured that all of us keep in touch and ensure that all of us don't go into this depression, right? Working from home, some people are alone, they don't have families, and coming to the office is not just from a work perspective. There's also a social element associated with that. Ensuring that we pick up the phone, call them, and we make sure that they are okay is something that we do collectively as an organization, right? And we do the same thing with our customers. Pick up the phone and talk to them and say, hey, how you're doing? I send text messages to my customers as well and say, are you okay? Especially the ones who are really badly affected by this in the airline industry and all that. To ensure that they are okay and we are doing the right things for them as well.
Then the other thing earlier on we discussed was also how this was a critical and important time to really prepare your organization and your people before the crisis comes to an end. So Can you share what are some of the strategies or steps that your organization has taken?
Correct. I think a crisis of this magnitude will change business, society, global economic order in many ways. Supply chains may be reconfigured to remove vulnerabilities that have been exposed by the pandemic. Across all aspects of business performance, the crisis will reveal both the weaknesses and opportunities to improve. This is important for us to understand, especially the weaknesses side. Things will turn around. We must prepare. We want to leap into action. That's extremely important for us to do. This is why earlier I mentioned about listening to customers is important, because when you keep your ear to the ground and listening, right, on what's happening around you, and then also talking to your customers and knowing what is going on, right, you can see things changing because you're talking to them often enough. You'll see them change in terms of when they are starting to talk about being more positive. You'll start seeing that things are beginning to change. They get approvals for budgets, that things are changing. So you need to keep in touch with your customers so that you know what is going on. And also more than the business side of things is really to be there to help them out, right? That's extremely important. And I said, enablement, best time to learn. You're talking about preparing yourself, prepare by learning. Learning about all the things that you wanted to learn. You want to learn about a technology, go and pick that up. You want to learn about a skill, the negotiation skill, presentation skill, go and pick that up. You've got the time for that now, right? Plan, understand tech, deep dive into that. Nothing stops us from doing this, right? From business perspective and making plans. Plans are positive, right? Not building a foundation for the future and galvanizing around that is important. We do so many models and simulations to think about, okay, what do we do today at present to deal with the crisis? What can we do the moment we come out of the crisis? What are the 2 or 3 key areas that we will immediately invest in? I think doing that is extremely important to get the team ready. If not, what will happen is when it turns, and if you're sitting back and saying, I'm going to wait for it to turn and then I will do something about it, it'll be too late because the market will go so fast ahead of you, you won't be able to keep up and catch up. And that makes it extremely hard, right? And you will lose out in terms of having the opportunity to help your customer, and you'll lose out also having the opportunity to turn things around for your organization, for your people, and you owe it to them. We are all asking for everybody to sacrifice their time and many other things. We should not lose sight of when it turns around, what should we do for them as quickly as possible so that they can benefit from the turnaround at the end of the day. So I think staying prepared, getting plans done, getting yourself prepared in terms of enablement, listening, and looking out for things that are happening around you is extremely, extremely critical at this juncture for me. I think if you don't do that well, and it turns around, you'll really be at the losing end and not being able to react fast enough.
Hi, Viju. Wow, that's about 2 months ago that we recorded this episode.
Yeah. I just realized when that time I said 9 weeks, right? Now 9 weeks seems like everybody was already working from home. That time was like 9 weeks before that, nobody was, right? So I was just thinking context, right?
Yeah.
I think it's been an interesting journey, right, for us because, like I said, we started working from very early, right? And many people in the industry were thinking that we were being really conservative, but I think we did the right thing, and we never wanted to take the risk and put our associates at risk, their families at risk, right? So we did the right thing by ensuring that everyone worked from home, and we are still doing that. Keeping everybody, the communication, the frequency of communication. Our CEO speaks to us every 2 weeks and tells us what's going on and how people are coping and what's happening in the business. So I think that's extremely important. So that's happened a lot, and I really highly appreciate that. Right? I think it calms the nerves. Right?
That's true. Now, for those who just joined us, welcome. And we have Mr. Viju Chakarapany from Red Hat, who's actually the head of the regional enablement technologies. His title is very long, so I will actually properly introduce him at the end. But generally, we just finished the episode premiere where he shared how focusing on customers are critical in terms of preparing ourselves to actually tap on the opportunities when it comes, especially during this aftermath of the crisis, and how employees are important as well. So right now, I think because there'll be a bit of lag, you can actually start to key in your questions on the chat box. So if you're coming in from YouTube on a desktop, log into your account and key in your questions towards the right-hand side on the chat box. If you're coming in from your mobile, the chat box is actually at the bottom. So while we're waiting actually for the questions to come in, I would like to just check with you, from your perspective, right, has the customer decision-making changed, and what impact has it been since the COVID-19 crisis?
I mean, definitely changed, right? For everybody, the decision making has changed. I think, regardless of the industry, even in industries where it's going so quickly, like for example, the retail stores, right? Like supermarkets, the way they have their frequency in which they put everything up on their shelves, right? That's increased tremendously because people are buying and they're home most of the time, so they are doing all kinds of things. Like if you go to the bakery section, there's nothing left, right? Because not that we don't have the things, but it's just that the frequency in which they top it up, they have to rethink and reconfigure how they're doing things, hiring more people and whatnot, right? I think, and also in companies and industries where things are not going as well, right? What I said before was a little bit more positive, but there are lots of negativity that's happening within the industry, and understandable crisis, right? You'll have that. How are they adjusting, right? Really, the cash flow side of things is extremely important. Now, keeping the business going, it's really not about the profitability per se, right? It's really about the money coming in, right? And the actual cash. And that's extremely critical for survival. So I think most of them are very, very focused on, let's make sure that our cash flow is positive, and we can keep that going. So we can keep our employees, right? And we don't have to fire anyone, retrench anyone, right? I think in Singapore, of course, the government's doing a lot for the businesses, covering their up to 75% of the salaries for the employers, and up to 4,600 or $5,000 along those lines. Those are all good things, right? Where government is getting involved in ensuring that we can keep this going, because the last thing we want is a substantial number of people in the community who are jobless. That will affect the economy, have social problems, and everything else that comes along with it. So I think helping businesses to cope with that. So decision making nowadays is really on, is it absolutely critical for us to do it now? Will it help the business? Is it a great investment area now because there's an opportunity for us to invest in? And can we delay it slightly longer? Can we, renegotiate some of the deals that we have already signed with our customers, right? I should say our partners, and see what makes most amount of sense. I think those are the conversations that we are having. But bright spots, there are bright spots. There are still industries spending, right, and spending a lot, right. And I would say because they feel that this is the best time to get ready, they have the cash, they have been, saving for this, just like, the reserves that Singapore had, which has helped us, or which is helping us, tide through the storm, right. And they are beginning to see, okay, there are certain opportunities we can take advantage of. Let's do that, so that we can get ready. So I think everybody is adjusting in a different way, either to stay afloat or to take advantage of the situation to. So in a positive, right? When I say take advantage, I'm not saying it in any negative way, right? Hey, this is the best time to invest, because we never get this opportunity where things are this quiet for us to start focusing on some of the things that we always said we wanted to do, and they are beginning to turn that on, right? And that's a positive thing. So we have conversations in both ways, right? Where it's really positive, we are of course helping our customers. Where it's not, we are of course helping our customers to cope with it as well, as much as we can, right? We are also running a business, so we have to balance that out. So I think it's changing in many different ways, and it's really a mode of survival, or I would say mode of investment to take advantage of the downtime for the matter.
So we have a question. Thanks, Viju. We have a question from Dr. Philip Mary. He's asking, do you think people will be afraid of a return to work? What can companies do to help them feel safe?
I think it's interesting question, because I asked this question to my team, my collective team across the board, and I'm not just talking about Singapore, right, across Asia Pacific. Would you go back, if the opportunity comes? And it's really a mixed bag. Yes, a lot of them are still very skeptical. We'll go back because of what's happening out there. But the fear is there. Families, they are not just individuals going to companies and working, right? They've got families to take care of as well. So they are also concerned, right? Is this the right time to go back and all that? I think in certain places they feel that it's okay. Classic New Zealand, where things are pretty much getting back to normal, right? Social distancing is also not there now, and they're feeling a lot more comfortable. So the question on, do you think they will be comfortable or not, it really depends on, like what we said, how the government is making them feel, whether the numbers are coming down, whether it's dropping, whether people feel confident that the numbers will not spike again. Classic again is New Zealand, even in Hong Kong. And when I was talking to another colleague of mine, and he was saying that we never closed restaurants. We could always go and sit and eat there. I mean, we can't do that in Singapore, right? And I'm like, what, really? He said, yes, we could still do that. But we did it in a very different way, right? We had social distancing. We were covered. We couldn't see each other. We were separated and whatnot. But, the things still went on, right? So I think if we can make people feel safe in the sense that take the right precautions, ensure that the testing carries on, ensure that when a vaccine comes on, everybody gets access to it, and giving them the freedom. I think this is important. This is where I think Red Hat does a very good job of giving the associates the freedom to choose when you feel comfortable to come back. Because of the present situation, the company is being flexible as well, right? And when you do that, people will feel confident, right? Hey, I can go and I need to, don't be forced to go. I can do it. I can do my work from home, which is great. I know that some businesses can't, and they're doing everything they can to keep the workplace safe. Even sports, right? That's starting. The English Premier League is starting. Bundesliga has started, right? I'm a big sports fan, right? And I love soccer. So for me, that's a big thing, right? And they are doing it in the safest possible manner with so many precautions, right? I think that's going to be very important to show that take it slowly, and the question about how do you make sure that you make them feel safe is, don't go big bang, bit by bit, take it slowly. And once, one thing, or you've done one thing and shown that, hey, it's safe, then you can take the next step and say it's safe, and then the next step and whatnot, like similar to this sports fraternity, right? They are doing it, but no fans, because it's too risky, right? And then once they can show that, yeah, we can carry on without having fans for a while, maybe we have 100 fans, 200 fans, and then they can increase that out. Similarly, in businesses, they need to do that as well.
Yeah, thanks, Viju, for sharing. Actually, I'm going to switch gears and ask you a question which I may not have asked you previously. So it's more on the open source architecture that actually Red Hat has. So I think we had this conversation before where a lot of your customers previously were more towards the institution and B2B. But recently I saw an ad that talks about actually utilizing Red Hat as an open source for web app development for maybe B2C as well. I was just wondering, do you see any things in terms of changing customer grouping in where your current business is actually going into the future?
I think Red Hat has always been in the forefront of digital transformation, right? And we've been singing this song for many years, right? And COVID-19 has just accelerated the change, the transformation, so to speak. So, regardless of industry, regardless of B2B, B2C, I think digitization is going to happen, and that's been happening, right? It's just accelerated across the board. I think for us is the conversations that we're having in terms of building platforms to do the work that our customers have to do, right? That means building a faster way of building applications, for example. How do we do it using your platform? How do we use it using your technologies? Those sort of things are, those sort of questions are being asked a lot more frequently now, right? And people are getting more interested. Hey, I really need to know, because I think uh, I can't do this anymore. We have to do things a lot faster. How do we automate, for example, right? Especially during these times, people can't go back to the office, right? If they can get access to the systems, great. But if they can't, can we automate some of these so that they can focus on the bigger things, right? This is a key area that we are also, focusing on. Technology aside, and this is another thing that people don't realize, right? It's the cultural change that needs to happen within organizations, right? For us, from a technology perspective, right, we call it, uh, development and operations, right? DevOps, right? Or you can put security in the DevSecOps. And the developers and the operators don't usually chat, but in this day and age, you need to, because the rate in which you are coming up with a new application is so fast. I mean, you can see that in your phones, right? The apps get updated so quickly. So how do we make sure that the operations understand how quickly this is happening, and adjust to the change, and so that whenever things are being developed, they can operate it well, so that the businesses can gain out of that. And that's a cultural change, because that sort of connection never used to happen, right, in our industry, at least, or at least in the IT back end. And constantly we are telling people it's a cultural change. You need to really change the way you all are working, change your perspective, so that you can start adjusting to these things, right? And taking full advantage of it, because the world has changed, right? Finally, I think, and this is an extremely crucial, I would say, aspect of technological advancement. For example, it's about being as open as possible, because I get asked this question all the time. Where do you think this technology is going? And my answer sometimes is, I don't know. And my customers are like, what do you mean you don't know? I say, I don't know, because there's so many options, right? And which is why we keep saying, keep it as open as possible, right? Because you're swimming and going to an island, you want to make sure that when you land there and you look out, you've got another few islands that you could swim to, and you don't want to land up in a place where you're stuck forever. You can't go anywhere, unless someone rescues you, right? And you want to have the most open choice of making the decision when it comes to it. As technology moves fast, you go to a place, you can make the next decision. You're open to make the decision, and you'll never be locked in some form or shape, right? So I think those are things that customers are beginning to realize as well as they're going through this change. They realize that, hey, whatever we have invested in, it's not that agile. We can't really make that switch, or we can't really be developed that fast. And we are trying to help customers through that changes. Be it B2B, be it B2C, it doesn't matter, right? It's everywhere.
Right. Thanks for sharing. And I think you're right. I think in life, right, whether we're looking at studies, whether we're looking at business, we're looking at clientele, it's always important to actually have options and also offer the options actually to our clients as well. That's quite important. So actually, Dr. Philip Mary say he agrees that he's also looking forward to watching the Huddersfield Town again.
Yeah, I know. I'm looking forward to hopefully Liverpool winning the league, right? Which they are just 2 games away. So I'm just hoping that we can play the 2 games as quickly as possible. After 30 years, winning the Premier League. My kids are also Liverpool supporters, and they've never seen Liverpool win the league, so they are also pretty excited about it. At least I've seen them win it before.
Yeah. The next question I'd like to ask you, I think when we started the episode interview premiere, you mentioned that you actually came into the workforce when it was the financial crisis, right? So I think you will probably really understand how the fresh graduates are feeling when they are coming into the workforce at this moment in time, especially when there's so much gloom and doom. I think in Singapore, there are some steps the government is trying to help. But if you are not in Singapore, but somewhere else, what would be the 3 tips actually you will give to fresh graduates who are stepping into the working world in such uncertain times?
Yeah, brings back memories, right? 1997 was when I graduated. The financial crisis, Asian financial crisis, started happening, and I came back from Australia to Singapore, right? And it was hard, right? Because there were not many jobs being offered at that moment in time. I think one of the things I quickly realized then, and even looking back, thinking about it, is be really open, right? Because when you come out from uni, you have this perception that this is the kind of job that I want to do, right? I won't do this, I won't really do that. But the reality is you can't, right? You need to be really willing to try and gain skills as much as possible, right? Which also means that sometimes doing something which you are not really trained for, right? I did a lot of teaching, right? I did relief teaching for the time to pass the time before I found something. Even that, I learned a lot on how to articulate myself, how to ensure that I present myself well to the students. How do I deal with, because when you're students is different when you're dealing with your classmates, right? When you go to the working world, you've got people who've been in the industry for a long time. That means lots of great teachers who have spent a lot of time honing the skills, and then you have like me, right? And sitting there listening to them, learning from them, I took the opportunity, I think, to learn as much as possible from experiences, right? And being open to do different things, and then until the opportunity comes. That's one. 2 is, sometimes it's not a bad thing to stay in school, right? Especially now, if the market's not right, and you've always wanted to further your studies, but said that maybe I'll work for a few years before I do that, this might be a good time to do that. And I mentioned this before, right? Enablement, right? This is the best time to learn and make use of that, even if you're working. Even for the students, I'll say that maybe it might be a good time to stay and do a 1 year postgrad, either a diploma or another degree or whatever, right? And that might give you a little bit more time before you come out. Of course, if you can afford it, right? If you can't, then coming out and trying that might make a difference. I think the third element to this is every uh, crisis presents an opportunity, a learning experience. I think I've heard this before somewhere, uh, don't let a good crisis go by, right? And the point is really take advantage of that from understanding how people are coping and dealing with it, and be it reading up in papers, talking to people who are going through that, even when you're starting to work, how the companies are coping with that. A certain element of resilience is required for students as well. Having said all that, which are like really mindset things that they need to think about, one critical competency that they need to build during this time is resilience, right? Really be resilient, because it's not just now. And I mentioned this even in our Q&A, right, previously. uh, Crisis will come, crisis will go. It'll keep happening. I mean, I've seen so many already so far. I mean, this might be one of the worst, but it'll continue happening. And it's really about being resilient, being able to prepare, being able to see the light at the tunnel, being positive. I think that's extremely important for students to understand as well, because that competency will last a lifetime. Right? No matter which stage of your life you're in, no matter which stage of your career you're in, and that's critical for people to take that on.
Yeah, thanks, Viju, for sharing. So basically, in summary, the first is we have to be open. We may be thinking about a particular career to develop when we first graduate. And I think I totally agree with you. I think previously we have maybe a 10-year cycle that we can climb, but now I think every 2 to 3 years, and immediately you have to change. So being open is critical. Two is actually the willingness to even learn after you graduate. And I think that is very relevant. And the third one is actually really about resilience, about learning to adapt as we go along. So from my perspective, it is actually things happen for a reason. So we have gone through a lot of changes, whether it's a good or bad. I'm sure there will be lessons and reflections that we can take on every single time. So for now, Viju, what I'll do is we'll see whether there will be questions coming in. I'm going to hide you for a little while and share more about yourself, how they can actually watch this episode again for a little while.
Okay.
Okay. Similar to all previous episodes, you can actually go to effectiveasianleadership.com and then click on the Leadership During Crisis Summit Series page. And here you'll be able to see all the various different pages and episodes of the Leadership During Crisis. So when you scroll all the way down, you will see Viju's page, and you can click on the blue button to basically go to his page and understand more about Viju. So once you click, you'll come into his page, and here you will see two videos. One is actually the pre-recorded video directly, and once today's episode with the Q&A is in, you see it actually within the blue button. Click on it and you can actually watch the live Q&A one more time. So here below is actually more about Viju. So Viju is currently the Senior Director and Head of the Red Hat's Asia Pacific APAC Solution Architecture and Enablement teams. So, and once you scroll a bit further down, you can also see how you can contact him if you have further questions that you'd like to ask him as well. Now, for these particular series, we actually will have a total of 30 episodes or more. I'm still at the ending process itself, but with so many episodes, it's going to be a lot easier if, let's say, we categorize it actually into overcoming personal crisis, whether it's emotional or business, or into business categories like leadership and communication. So we have this new platform that we actually load the programs on, which is learning.corporatetrainerconnect.com. In it, you'll find various different online courses on leadership, on emotional resilience, as well as this free leadership during crisis summit. So once you click on it, you can actually sign up for the series free of charge. So let me now get back to Viju again. Hi, Viju. Viju, there's a question that is coming in from Steve. So Steve is asking, what kind of major job challenges are facing by the associates during this special period? And I'll read on further because it's not shown on the screen. And how do you think that they could figure out those challenges, especially from a business perspective?
I think there are many major challenges, right? I would say, the first and foremost, the way we used to do business has changed, right? If you're going meeting up with customers and doing all the things face to face, that's changed, right, quite dramatically. That's a challenge in itself to try and convince customers that certain things can be done online. That's already a big challenge. Two is the market sentiments, right, has changed, right? Even though some of them, some customers might not be affected that badly by that. They are taking a more conservative viewpoint on investment, on spending, and whatnot. That in itself, it can be quite a challenge, right? Third is, of course, for employees itself, in terms of the family side of things, handling their personal affairs, right? And I know that this question is related to the business, but sometimes you can't really separate that, like black or white, right? There's always shades of gray in between. So how they manage that affects the way they manage internal, I should say, manage their affairs with their customers, with their teams, with their leaders, and that needs to also we also need to think about that, to try and make that as that challenge itself, trying to make it as easy as possible for them to manage so that they can do their best work when they come in, right? So having said all these challenges, I think the second part of the question is, how do you think that they can figure out how figure this out? I think in terms of solutions, right? What are the solutions associated with it? I think it goes back to resilience, and that's very important. I even before taking the first step towards a solution, I think people have to internally be convinced that this will pass. Be positive and be resilient, right? And not, the easiest thing to do, and this is the fight or flight, mentality, right? Something is happening and you have never experienced it before. What do? You run right away from it as quickly as possible. So mentality wise, you really need to change that mentality, right? On, hey, you know what, nothing's going to work, everything is negative, da, 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 da. You need to really turn that on, turn on the positivity, turn on the resilience, turn on the courage, right? Which is extremely important. One of our core values in Red Hat is courage, right? With freedom, with courage, accountability, and everything else that comes about. Courage, I think, especially now, that particular value is very important. Having the courage to do the right thing, having the courage to face up to the adversities is important. And how do we apply that? When you're talking to customers and understanding what they're going through, there are bright spots that they really want to work on. They are still going through challenges, every one of them. How can you be of service to them, right? Is extremely important. How do you adjust, or how do you help them through the process is important. You need to talk to them and figure out, okay, how do we, there's a certain element that you're trying to do. You want to, that you need to revamp your back end because, it's not up to speed. You've realized it, especially in this COVID situation where you're not fast enough in terms of reacting to things. I want to at least start doing, small projects and, work with them through that, and even though you have to do it online, it can be done. People have closed so many deals online. We have realized it as well. And customers are willing to do it. And they are not going to push back. Like before, I said, no, I think it's best if we talk, in person. They don't do that because they know they can't. And they are willing to also try. And if they are willing to try, you need to try and see how you can work with them to make that happen. There are many bright spots. And when there aren't, realize there isn't, help them to the customers. You might not be able to bring that, from a business perspective, that big deal that you've always been closing with them, that might have to take another year or so before, it comes back. But then again, help them, right, to adjust, whatever you can. Because when they get better, you want to be there to, also partner with them, right? For the rest, focus on areas where they really want to invest in and show how in your technology, in your whatever your company is doing and how we do it, we understand what they're going through, and we can help them through these tough times, right? And the element of change and helping them through that from a business perspective is important. If that will bring us the dollars, might not bring as much as maybe we are used to, because of everything that we need to do to help them through these crises. But at least things don't stop. Right? The worst thing to do now is stop, right? And just sit back and say, I'm not moving till things become better. Constantly thinking about stuff on a daily basis on what else they can do is important.
Yeah, thanks, Viju. So totally agree. I think the only way we know what to do is actually by engaging with our customers and our clients, listening to them, and also being realistic about not the ability to be able to close the small steps and small deals rather than actually aiming for that big one, because it may take a little while. But in the process, actually, you may be building something for the longer term as well. So time really flies, Viju. We are already at 11:42 when we're supposed to be ending at 11:30. So thank you everyone who's still online with us. We have another session that's coming on at 1:50 p.m. So be on YouTube, look at who is coming on next. She's a FMCG business leader who will be sharing more on a consistent message itself. So thanks again, Viju, for taking your morning to share your experience with our audience. And we will actually update and edit the videos and upload into the page itself. So thank you, everyone, and goodbye.
Thanks, Janet, and thanks for the questions as well. And take care and stay safe and stay healthy.
You too. Thank you very much.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.